Baltimore Ravens enter must-win territory against the Chicago Bears in week number 8, and Bears head coach Ben Johnson gave his opinions on John Harbaugh, Roquan Smith, and a struggling Baltimore Ravens team. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today on this crossover Thursday edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage here for you, and we have a jam-packed episode today. It is crossover Thursday, so Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears will be joining us. We're going to break down some of the biggest stories, key matchups, and keys to victory for the Ravens Week 8 game against the Chicago Bears, but we're also going to dive into a little bit here in this first part of the show. Before that, Ben Johnson, the Bears head coach, he gave his opinions on John Harbaugh, Roquan Smith, and this Baltimore Ravens team. The Ravens also got some pretty massive injury news on Wednesday, so we'll dive into all of that, as well as clearing up some confusion about the whole distraction situation in the Ravens locker room, which I don't even know what's going on at this point. But again, thank you for being here. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens, this crossover Thursday, is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's dive into it. Ben Johnson, who, look, the Bears right now on a 4-game winning streak. He has his team playing good football and winning football. This Ravens team right now, a little bit of the opposite, right? 4-game win streak for the Bears, 4-game loss streak for the Ravens. Ben Johnson gave his opinion on the Ravens. He said, quote, "The record really doesn't indicate what they're capable of doing. They can put up points in bunches, and this defense is always, since Harbaugh's been there, they've always found a way to respond. Coach Harbaugh, he's only had 2 losing seasons, so he knows what he's doing. So we've got to be on our stuff here this week." And look, I know that it feels a little bit like coach speak. You know, we talked about this with Andy Reid a couple of weeks ago, where he kind of praised the Ravens defense, and everyone's like, okay, Andy, come on, you don't really believe that. Honestly, I feel like the league understands the Ravens position right now. And hear me out on this, right? And Kyle Hamilton talked a little bit about this when he was speaking to the media on Wednesday, where he talked about how when, you know, you're in a corner, you're going to be punching and fighting to get out of that corner, right? Like when a team is cornered and, you know, they're right up against it, season's on the line, you're going to see this team start to fight back. At least I'd hope. I mean, I wish they had done it earlier, but you know, Kyle Hamilton, the exact quote that he said was, "It's kind of a backs against the wall mindset. I've never seen a boxer get out of the corner by not swinging or throwing any punches. It's kind of that mindset that we should have brought into the season," which I feel like we kind of had in the Rams game. In the Browns game, I thought we played well too. But like I said, we're forward thinking. I'm not really too worried about those games. We have a lot to prove going forward, so we have to do it again and do it better. I think it shows the respect that the league still has for the Ravens and John Harbaugh, despite their start, whether that is deserved or not. I mean, look, they have a long history of sometimes finding themselves in a corner and backing out of it. Other times they don't. We'll just have to see how that unfolds. Ben Johnson also talked about Roquan Smith. On Roquan, he said, quote, "He's fast, see ball, get ball. He finds a way to shed and be around the football. Seems like he's been an all-pro now for 5 years in a row." You know, he certainly didn't play like an all-pro during the time he was out there early this season. Again, like, I think the Bears are going to be a motivation factor for Roquan. I know Roquan essentially didn't say that. You know, it's just they're going to try to win the game, and Roquan's on that mindset. Roquan said he feels refreshed, regenerated, and ready. If they do lose this game, I mean, you're in a really, really bad spot. Now, the injury report came out for the Ravens on Wednesday. We know Lamar Jackson, he did return to practice. It was glorious, finally, right? Lamar back at practice. So he was limited on the day. He also had a lot of guys practicing in full, which was great. Joby Awuzie, Zay Flowers, Patrick Ricard, Roquan Smith, Ronnie Stanley, and Tez Walker all full. The only other limited person was Kyle Hamilton with his groin injury, and Marlon Humphrey did not practice. The Ravens also placed Tavius Robinson on injured reserve. They activated Emory Jones. That's a move that they made there. So, you know, Tavius is a tough loss, but Emory Jones being back is really good. Injury wise, the Ravens, they have the bye week advantage and the rest advantage. That's really, really good. And the Bears are a little banged up heading into this week with guys like DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, and others not participating in practice. So, hopefully the Ravens can take advantage of that. And this Bears game going to be really, really exciting. Also want to clarify one thing. Obviously, yesterday we did a show about the whole Ravens locker room anonymous player report thing from the Baltimore Sun. And in that report, it said that Ravens coaches removed things from the locker room, right? That's what it said. It said multiple players told the Baltimore Sun that it was the coaches that decided to move on from the ping pong table, the basketball hoop, et cetera, in the locker room. So that's what we talked about on the show. Well, it then came out after that happened, after the show came out or after the recording, that it was actually the players. Mike Garafolo reported that on Wednesday afternoon. Apparently, it also came out a little earlier than that. But I was just talking about the information that I had available to me at that moment. So again, apologies for the confusion on that. It's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of confusion just in general. There's a lot of the fan base that feels like this is just a cover up for John Harbaugh. It wasn't really the players. Other people believe John Harbaugh's telling the truth. He obviously denied it when he talked to the media. Just a lot of stuff going on with that. A lot of drama there. So we're just going to leave that drama over there and just let it play out. We're going to talk football here on Locked On Ravens. So again, I apologize for the confusion on the show yesterday. It was what I had available. Craziness. I mean, this team is crazy right now. So we'll have to see if they can correct some of that craziness in week number 8 against the Bears. And we'll talk about that game with Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears. So without any further ado, let's get into our conversation with Lauren. Lauren, this Bears team on a nice low 4-game win streak. The defense is forcing turnovers left and right. You're getting contributions from a lot of unsung heroes, it feels like. And it seems like Ben Johnson's first year, while, again, not perfect, has gone in a pretty good direction for the Bears so far. What's the biggest story in Chicago right now as you'd like to get some more momentum?
Yeah, I think big picture, this is a Bears team that went from the big difference between last year and this year is finding a way to win versus finding a way to lose. Like, they couldn't get out of their own way last year, and right now they seem to be finding ways to come up with these 1-point win over the Commanders, 1-point win over the Raiders, and a lot of that's the turnovers you talked about there, or it's clutch plays at the end of the game that might make up for mistakes you've seen along the way. And so there's a feeling like, okay, you beat a pretty good Commanders team, but maybe the Saints aren't that great. Maybe the Raiders aren't that great. So there's a little something to prove, even on a 4-game winning streak against a team like the Ravens, that even on a 4-game losing streak still is the home favorite. And if Lamar Jackson plays, it might be the biggest test the Bears have had in quite a few weeks.
Yeah, and Ben Johnson kind of echoed what you're saying there in terms of how he views the Ravens, saying, quote, the record doesn't indicate what they're capable of doing. They can put up points in bunches, and this defense is always, since Harbaugh's been there, they've always found a way to respond. He also said Coach Harbaugh, he's only had 2 losing seasons, so he knows what he's doing. So we've got to be on our stuff here this week. And I think that for the Ravens is how they're approaching things is, look, they know they're talented. They have the talent on the roster, but there have been so many things that have gone wrong for them this season. I mean, if I were to kind of pinpoint a biggest story, I think my answer to you would be, well, how much time do you have? Because there are so many different things. There was on Monday a stunning report from the Baltimore Sun about how, anonymous players speaking to reporters and everybody talking about the offense and Ravens not putting guys in positions. And apparently they're taking stuff out of the locker room. And first this article said the coaches. Now it wasn't the coaches and it was the players. So just a lot of stuff off the field is going wrong, first of all, and just weirdness. But on the field, the defense has not been good at all this year. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. And I think the big story is Lamar Jackson returning to practice on Wednesday in a limited fashion. He's been dealing with that hamstring injury. The Ravens are getting a lot healthier. And honestly, should Lauren have a lot of guys back for this game. Obviously, Roquan Smith will get to the revenge factor for him, I'm sure, over the course of this show against the Bears. He is expected to play, at least at this point. We'll see. Nothing guaranteed. Only 2 Ravens missed practice, and that was Marlon Humphrey and Tavius Robinson. Tavius is going on IR, so he will not play in this one. The Ravens only have 3 outside linebackers on their roster at this point because they decided to trade it off to Los Angeles, and then, of course, Tavius gets hurt the next game. So a little bit of lack of depth there, but Lamar Jackson, look, with all great quarterbacks, the floor is just going to get so lowered and the ceiling is going to get so lowered when you don't have a guy like that on the field. If Lamar does not play in this game, I have 0 confidence in Cooper Rush. I have maybe 1% confidence in Tyler Huntley because, he is what makes this team go. And he also masks a lot of poor offensive line play that's been going on. And even he hasn't been able to mask some of it considering how poor they have been. So again, that's kind of like the short Spark Notes version of what's going on in Baltimore right now. There's a lot more than that. But again, we'd be here for probably like 2 hours if I went into it all in detail after detail after detail.
Yeah, and that's why I want to pin down a little bit on the defense here, because I think we can all get a gist of like, yeah, Lamar Jackson in versus out. We don't have to hammer that home too much. We kind of get that. But this Ravens defense, 32nd in points allowed, 30th in yards allowed. Like, we know they've been bad a lot of the season, but you talk about them getting healthier and guys coming back. And even that last game before the bye, they hold a pretty good Rams team to only 17 points. Like, has there been real progress that just hasn't yet been reflected in because of how bad they were at the beginning? And I guess, like, are you expecting that the Ravens defense we see against the Bears should be better than the last ranked defense in football, or do you still feel like they got to prove it?
I think they definitely still have to prove it. I mean, you're right. That Rams game did, I think, a lot for confidence levels in that defense. The Rams did make some mistakes that helped out Baltimore, including a couple of pretty easily overthrown balls by Matthew Stafford that could have been touchdowns or drops by Devontae Adams. But every team benefits from mistakes in every game. So I'm going to give the Ravens their credit defensively there and say, look, I mean, you saw the Rams the next week go abroad and put up 35 on Jacksonville. Like, that's a really good offense there. And even though Puka went down in that game, even still, I mean, they did that without Puka. So I think that for this Ravens defense, there have been a couple of problems for them this season. First has been turnovers. I mentioned the Bears. They're the best turnover defense in the league. Turnover percentage. The Ravens are 30th in the league in turnovers, with just 3 in their first 6 games. They're obviously 30th as well in turnover percentage. They're also not getting a ton of pressure on the quarterback, which, of course, I mentioned with them not really having a bunch of outside linebackers. That's not great. But when you look at the Ravens sack leaders so far this season, you would think that it'd be a bunch of guys, vying for the spot, and it's a bunch of people that have been playing for a lot of the year. Nnamdi Madubuike is their sack leader, and he has not played since week 2. So it's been rough for them in terms of that. Nnamdi was a really big presence on the interior. He's out for the season. They haven't been able to replicate a lot of that. Tavius Robinson also has 2 sacks. He is also now not going to play, and he broke his foot. He's not going to be back for a while. So Baltimore, in terms of, a bunch of different avenues, they're just not playing great right now. They're not wonderful in the red zone. They're a bottom 5 red zone conversion defense. They're a bottom 6 third down percentage defense. There are so many different issues, but I think if you want to try to beat this Bears team, you have to try to speed up the clock of Caleb Williams, who, again, you mentioned his play over the past couple of weeks. You got to put pressure on him, speed up that internal clock, force him to go through his reads a little quicker, and just hope he makes some mistakes and you force some of those turnovers. I think this game will come down to the turnover battle. Baltimore's defense, though, has not done a great job at forcing those.
Yeah, you're right about the turnovers, that yes, it absolutely matters every week, but like, especially I think for this Bears defense, they've been maybe a little bit more turnover reliant than you'd like to be. Last week against the Saints are kind of a bad team. I don't need to, they're going to get turnovers on bad teams, but when they played the Commanders and the Raiders in each of those 2 games on this winning streak, the other team punted once in each of those games. Every drive was either points or turnovers. Rarely was it a true, like, defensive stop on third down, get you off the field. So if it's Lamar Jackson and he can take care of the football and not put the ball in harm's way, this Bears defense is going to have to struggle a little bit more to make those stops and not, give up field goals or touchdowns on every drive. And worth noting, like, Derrick Henry and his ball security is going to be a big factor here, because it's not just interception. The Bears have forced a decent number of fumbles this season as well, and vice versa. I think Caleb Williams has gotten away with some interceptable throws the last couple of weeks where he had one against the Saints, but could have had a couple against them and a couple against the Commanders that bring the performance down a little bit. And they need him to kind of get back to more crisp timing and connection with the receivers, because last week they were a run the ball and defense kind of team that wasn't their strategy the first few weeks of the season, but it worked really well for them. And they're going to try and continue the same thing against Baltimore with the hopes that, hey, this bad defense should help Caleb get, quote unquote, back on track a little bit more and reduce some of the concerns that they had, the last few weeks.
And I am curious a little bit to see which weapons Caleb will have available to him this week after the Bears injury report came out on Wednesday. I know that there are a couple of big names on there. So coming up in the second part of the show, Lauren and I will dive into some matchups to watch, who will be available who will not, and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way here on this crossover Thursday edition of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Bears. First, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. And I love how quick it is. You can just make your lineup in under a minute. And my favorite part, PrizePicks just added stacks. So if I want to ride with a player, I can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow players in the app and copy their lineups with one click. And the new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it won't count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. And the show is brought to you by Gametime. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. And I pulled up Gametime, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100, and the app made it super simple. I can even see the exact view from my seat before buying, and I love zone deals too. You pick the section, Gametime picks the seats, and you save big. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Moving along here, both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Bears. Kevin Oestreicher and Lauren Cox still talking about this Week 8 showdown between the Ravens and the Bears. And Lauren, I talked about it a little bit at the end of that first segment, where the Bears injury report has some interesting names on it, including DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. What do you have on those guys? Is this just kind of rest maintenance, or some of these guys in real danger of missing the game on Sunday?
It's definitely hard to say definitively, but I think it's a little bit more rest and maintenance for those guys. They were all generally available in recent weeks. I mean, they've all been banged up, right? So I'm not confident that they're necessarily going to be out there and be 100% when they do play. But like, this was an offense that was able to use them as close to full capacity. I think the one I'd be most worried about there is Cole Kmet, because we've seen his role reduce a little bit due to injury. But Swift played the full game against the Saints and had a really, really strong game. I think there's just some soreness there. DJ Moore's been dealing with this hip and groin stuff for a couple weeks as well. He actually spent a night in the hospital after the Commanders game a couple weeks ago on Monday night, and then played the next game against the Saints. So like they've been able to be out there, but it's just more about like limitations there. And I think the bigger concern for Bears fans is actually the defensive player who missed practice, cornerback Tyreek Stevenson. His injury happened last week, and that's going to be a matchup I'm sure we'll talk about in a second here, but we can stick with the weapons. But that's where you're already banged up in the secondary, and if he's gone, that's a bigger deal. But they feel pretty good about the depth they have with the weapons, maybe everywhere except running back, because Swift kind of been the go-to guy there. But they've got receivers they like. They're certainly, the more time Kmet misses, the more time Colston Loveland will play at tight end, and they're perfectly fine with getting some of their younger guys more playing time there.
Yeah, and obviously no Jalen Johnson. So if you lose a guy with like Tyreek Stevenson and he's not going to be available, it's going to be a little bit tougher there. And especially, look, Zay Flowers has been, when Lamar Jackson's been out there, at least he's been the hub of the offense. I mean, he has been the guy that Lamar Jackson is targeting and that has really benefited, I think, from some of the other attention that some of the other weapons on Baltimore they've been receiving throughout the years. Zay has 423 yards receiving. The next closest right now is DeAndre Hopkins at 178. So he's the guy for them. And I think that whoever Zay is matched up on, that's going to be huge, because Zay, he's a 3-level receiver. He is an incredible route runner. Yards after the catch, he's really good. And I think on some of those third down conversions, we started to see that he can be a chain mover for them. And in year 3, he's now been through a couple of seasons. He has figured out a little bit more how to settle down in spots, work back to Lamar Jackson, which has been really cool to see. And his quick area burst is also incredible. So, I mean, that's something I'm looking at. And I think whether Tyreek Stevenson is out there or not, that's going to be a guy the Bears definitely have to hone in on. And hopefully the Ravens, because when Lamar's out there, I mean, they put up points for the most part when Lamar's out there. The problem is, like, I say this against that Houston team that they lost to, 44 points. I'm like, hey, if Lamar Jackson played in that game and they put up 40, well, the Ravens would have still lost 44-40. I mean, it's the defense that needs to figure things out. But I'll tell you what, Zay Flowers is one of those guys that I'm really looking at for this Ravens offense, and someone the Bears defense is going to have to look at too.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see how the Bears match that on the other end, because Kyler Gordon has some ability to play outside cornerback, and they've talked about that. They haven't talked about it like since Tyreek Stevenson got hurt, but like in the preseason and the lead up to the year, the possibility of moving him around a little bit more and not just keeping him in the slot, but saying maybe there's opportunities where he plays some safety or plays some outside cornerback. When Stevenson got hurt against the Saints, they brought in Nick McLeod off the bench. So essentially they had two backup outside cornerbacks and left Gordon in the slot. But with somebody like Zay Flowers, who they move around in the slot and to the outside, could they just say maybe it's easier to just have Gordon shadow him, that when Flowers in the slot, Gordon's gonna stay there with him, of course. And then when he goes outside, we'll just have Kyler follow him too there, so that you don't have, a bench special teams kind of cornerback trying to cover one of the Ravens' top receivers up and down the field. Like it's they've been able to get by fine with one backup in place of Jalen Johnson starting in Nashawn Wright, but two of them, certainly against a Lamar Jackson led team, is going to concern me, whether it's Hopkins or Bateman on the other side. In whatever rotation, you're going to see these Bears cornerbacks try and cover them. It's not a matchup I'm super confident in, and whether that then forces the Bears to play more two deep safeties, and then you take a guy out of the box, and then it becomes harder to stop the run. And we've seen Dennis Allen want to blitz to generate pass rush because they're not getting it as much from a 4-man rush as they'd like to. Like, there's some real ripple effects here of like how they're going to attack the Ravens offense.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing to me is, you look at the Bears defense and all the turnovers that they force, but in terms of yards per attempt, they're the second worst rushing defense in the league, giving up 5.3 yards per carry. Pass defense, not much better, at 28th in the league at 6.9 yards per attempt given up there. In your estimation, Lauren, I mean, look, turnovers are a huge deal and honestly help out the offense a ton as well. But what do you what's your estimation of how good this Bears defense actually is right now, all things considered?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell because they've been better the last couple of weeks. Like, really, since the bye week, they made some adjustments. That was the week 5 bye week for them. So the last 2 games, they've been really good against the run. They've loaded the box more. They put 8 or 9 guys in the box more often. A lot more single deep coverages than we saw the first few games of the season. They've blitzed more. They've gotten more aggressive up front. And so in some ways, it feels like they've made some real progress, and that just the averages are still inflated from the first handful of games of the season. Like, the Commanders were the number 1 rushing offense in football, and they held their running back under 4 yards per carry. I think it was under 3 yards per carry, but it was Jaden Daniels' legs that they had more trouble containing. So then it plays back into the Lamar Jackson matchup this week, where it's like, if he's out there, or even if it's Snoop Tyler Huntley, like the Bears were able to get to Jaden Daniels. They just couldn't actually bring him down. There were a bunch of missed tackles on the quarterback there that helped the Commanders manufacture a running game when their running backs themselves weren't able to do it. But I still think there's definite vulnerabilities in this Bears defense, especially if Tyreek Stevenson is indeed not able to go. The Saints had a couple of scoring drives that looked way too easy last week for not a very good Saints team. So I think the Ravens are going to be able to get theirs in this game. And I really do think the amount of balls they put in harm's way from a turnover perspective is the absolute difference in winning and losing this. That if the Bears can get 1 or 2, give them extra possessions, then I think they can win the shootout. But if the Ravens take really good care of the football and put up another 35-plus point game, I'm not sure that the Bears offense will consistently be able to drive down and score unless the Ravens are just totally giving everything up too. But I think they're playing better football right now than we've seen from them lately.
Yeah, it's something I talk about all the time. You mentioned extra possessions, and any offense, even if you're good, not good, somewhere in the middle, the best way to stop an opposing offense is to keep them off the field. And that's the big thing here. It doesn't matter who you are. And those turnovers the Bears have forced, like you talked about, Lauren, has been so huge, not just for getting the defense off the field, but putting the offense back onto it. And that's something the Ravens, unfortunately, have not been able to put in their favor from both a defensive perspective or an offensive perspective. And it's hurting them in both of those ways. But I think we have to talk about the Roquan factor at some point here. So we might as well just do it now. Roquan, he's not coming back to Chicago. Chicago's coming to Baltimore, but Roquan is going to be playing against Chicago for the first time. The last time these two teams actually matched up was back in 2021 when Roquan was still on the team. And he actually led the team with 17 tackles. That actually, if you remember, Lauren, and I won't forget it, even though the Ravens won that game, Robert Quinn had 3.5 sacks and looked like the best pass rusher of all time in a Bears uniform, but it came down to that. So Roquan, he is coming back from the hamstring injury. Admittedly, it's been a tough start to the year from him. He hasn't really looked great out there, a little bit slow, and that's been something even dating back to last year. I know, Ben Johnson gave him a lot of compliments during his press conference on Wednesday. He said he's fast, see ball, get ball type of guy. He said, quote, he finds a way to shed and be around the football. Seems like he's been an all-pro now for 5 years in a row. And look, Roquan's a very talented player, right? Obviously, a lot of great moments in Chicago. He followed that up early on in his Baltimore tenure with a lot of great moments there as well. But I think for Roquan, the big thing is, how healthy is he at this point? It's close to 100% as he can get, hopefully, but he's going to have to go up against an offense that, depending on who's out there or who isn't out there, that chess match, I feel like, between Roquan and Caleb Williams is going to be really intriguing.
Yeah, from a matchup standpoint, I think the Roquan thing is going to be more about, or let me say this, I think it's going to be less about tight ends matching up with him, right? I think traditionally we think, okay, linebacker, you're thinking Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet, and that really hasn't been a focal point of the Bears offense thus far. I think we've been looking for it to be a bigger focal point, but it's not like they've been struggling, so it's not like you can't really complain and say, oh, well, you should get the tight ends involved more, because they've been scoring plenty of points the last few weeks. So there's nothing to complain about in that department. It's more so saying, like, don't expect Ben Johnson to be saying, all right, let me get Loveland matched up with Roquan Smith here. Like, maybe they'll attack the middle of the field with receivers for sure, and that'll be part of the matchup. But I'm more curious in the running game, because in Chicago, that was kind of the knock on Roquan Smith, is that he's athletic and has good instincts, but likes to run around blocks and can't always fight through them and get off of them. And he makes a lot of tackles, but they're 4, 5, 6 yards past the line of scrimmage, where it's a good tackle, but it's a win for the offense by the time you made the tackle. So with the Bears running the ball better the last few weeks, I'm really curious, does the offensive line get to the second level and kind of corral Roquan in that same way? Or is he able to attack with that speed downhill fast enough before the Bears can get to him and he's in the backfield making big plays?
Yeah, he's going to have to diagnose things early, get his guys in position. I think he and Kyle Hamilton both. Hamilton's another player who, they made that move, trading it off away. They brought in Alohi Gilman from the Chargers, and Gilman's arrival helped free up Hamilton so the Ravens could play him more in that Swiss Army knife role, at least more than they could have. The Ravens have seen some struggles. I mean, they essentially have had to play a lot of their rookie class just by necessity because of how many injuries they've suffered so early on. But even a guy who had a big role from the jump, and Malaki Starks, that rookie safety out of Georgia, he's been second guessing himself. He's admitted and hasn't necessarily lived up to the expectations early on. Mike Green, who was their second round pick, hasn't been as dominant as many thought he would be. And he's now going to have an even bigger role with Tavius Robinson being out. So those veteran guys on the team, like a Roquan, like a Kyle Hamilton, and some of the other guys, they're going to need to step up in a huge way. If the Ravens want to get this one in for Chicago, just being able to, I guess, outsmart that Ravens defense, put them in bad positions, and make sure that they can put up points. Because, again, with Lamar Jackson out there, assuming he does play, the Bears are going to need touchdowns, not field goals, in order to win this one. So that's going to be on the Ravens defense for stopping them in the red zone potentially, or on the Bears offense for converting in those spots. But coming up in the final part of the show, Lauren and I will be diving into how each team can actually get the job done in week number 8. So be sure to stay tuned. We have plenty coming your way still on this crossover Thursday edition of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Bears. First, this show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Continuing on this crossover Thursday, it is Locked On Ravens and Locked On Bears. Kevin Oestreicher and Lauren Cox still diving into everything you need to know heading into this Week 8 showdown. Want to again remind everyone that today's crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Lauren, we've talked about some big stories. We've talked about some big matchups, but there are paths to victory that both these teams can take to get the job done. The Bears hoping to extend their win streak to 5. The Ravens hoping to get back on track. They need to win almost every game remaining in this season to try to make a run at the playoffs. From the Bears side of things, what do they need to do to pull out a victory on Sunday?
Yeah, I think the thing I'm watching for the most there is how much the Bears do or don't get in their own way. That's really been the biggest concern along this winning streak, which is, I know it feels like a luxury to say when you're on the losing streak over there, but like, if you bear with me, that like it has felt like the closest the Bears have come to losing in this time is when they've stopped themselves more than opponents really stopping them. And that's where I still am not fully confident in this team even beating the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday, because it's penalties, it's miscommunication between quarterback and receiver, and it's just little things that you would like to see a team have cleaned up by week 6, week 7, week 8 in the NFL, like this time of year. That, okay, it's the first year under Ben Johnson, new coaching staff, so there's some connections there, but like false starts and illegal formations. It's not just like a holding here or a defensive pass interference there, but it's the really like self-inflicted type of penalties, a roughing the passer where you go high for no reason. It's just like you're giving the other team extra chances, and a team that's good like the Ravens, that is certainly as talented as the Ravens is, I know they've been struggling, but like they can absolutely take advantage of that. And if the Bears can kind of just get out of their own way and wait for, this Ravens defense to make some mistakes here and there, and then depending on what happens with Lamar Jackson, you wait for the Ravens offense to make some mistakes here and there. You don't have to do too much to be able to just win this game. You just kind of let the game come to you a little bit more. Caleb's been pressing a little bit. Some of the other guys on offense have been trying to do a little bit too much. And in theory, take a deep breath, slow it down a little bit, take it out of Lamar Jackson's hands if he's playing, and play your game. And I think that's, it sounds too simple, but like that's all the Bears have to do to win this game. Like, you have playmakers. Ben Johnson's going to get receivers open. Just throw them the ball. You don't have to force these downfield passes. Just let them run their game. You run your running game and hope defensively you get a turnover or two. And like, that's kind of the winning formula for Chicago right now.
Yeah, and for Baltimore, again, turnovers are going to be the name of the game here for both teams, and I think whoever wins that turnover battle probably does win the game. But I also do look at the conversion percentages, and Chicago has been incredible on third down this year as a defense. They've been getting teams off of the field in those situations. Right now, the Bears are third in the NFL in terms of third down conversion rate, just giving up 30.5% of those opportunities, which is incredible. Now, the Ravens stats are a little bit skewed on the offensive side of the ball because Lamar hasn't been in there for 2 games, so they look a little worse than they probably should be. Right now, they're 12th offensively in third down conversion percentage. But kind of taking that all into account, they need to not play behind the sticks on first and second down. Don't get a penalty on first down to make it 1st and 15. Don't throw this weird ball on first down to make it 2nd and 10. The Ravens sometimes get too cute for their own good. They have a lot of talent throughout the board here, but sometimes Derrick Henry, like we saw in week 6, will not be on the field, or they won't use him from the half-yard line and instead run that ball with Mark Andrews. And you're thinking, like, isn't this what you got Derrick Henry for? Isn't this one of the reasons you brought him in? So you just can't outsmart yourself here. But the thing is, for the Ravens for the past couple of years, it's been, all right, well, the Ravens are just beating themselves, right? It's not the opponents, it's them. Well, this year it's been the opposite for the most part. It's been, man, these teams just been taking it to Baltimore. Whether the Bills game, they beat themselves. That was bad. But then you have the Lions taking it to you, the Chiefs, the Texans, even the Rams. That was a little more of like the Ravens making mistakes, but even still, the Rams still had a good opportunity to win that based off what they did. You can't let the Bears get early confidence, in my opinion, right? You need to force pressure on Caleb Williams early. You mentioned Ben Johnson scheming open receivers, which he will do, and he is very good at. You have to try. They have like Nate Wiggins, who's been incredible for them this season. So hopefully, if DJ Moore is unable to play, on Rome Odunze, or maybe if it is on DJ Moore, whoever it may be, you need to be able to, on the flip side of it, keep the Bears behind the sticks, get a sack on Caleb Williams on a 2nd down and make it 3rd and 17, or, win a rep so hard on the D line that you force a hold and you make it 2nd and 20, after a big gain. And you have to get that. But honestly, I think for the Ravens, if Lamar Jackson plays, it's just going to be about putting the ball in the end zone. And that's in the red zone as well, where the Ravens red zone wise this season, and again, stats are kind of skewed, but it's kind of been this way the whole season. The Ravens are one of the worst red zone offenses in the NFL, converting on just 44.4% of those opportunities. Just like I said, the Bears probably won't win if they kick field goals. The Ravens won't win if they kick field goals either. So you have to convert in the red zone, have to put the ball in the end zone. That to me is a really, really big key in this game. Lauren's great. Be sure to check him out over at Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I have you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage, including the main show Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We have bonus episodes on the weekends when there are headlines. Locked On Ravens Squad show twice per week with myself, Sam and Joku, and former Ravens receiver Kaji Ismail. We got Locked On Ravens watch-alongs. We have the instant reaction shows after games, as well as after pieces of big news. We got a lot here for you on Locked On Ravens. So if you want that daily Ravens content and coverage, again, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, video form and audio form. Coming up tomorrow, we're running out the week with more daily Ravens coverage. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.